Hello, my name is Petra Nordqvist. I'm Professor of Sociology at the University of Manchester and co-director of the Morgan Centre. My research is about donor conception and kinship, and today I will be talking about is the way that people do intimacy changing. And I will talk about first where we've come from. So what do we assume when we talk about marriage and family life? Then I'm going to be looking at 3 important changes in intimate life, and then I'm going to ask the question again, is intimate life changing? A few definitions before we get going. When I talk about intimacy, I talk about romantic couple relationships today and not other forms of intimate relationships. When I talk about doing intimate life, I refer to here predominantly statistical data about how people choose to live their lives. Do they choose to get married? Do they choose to cohabit, for example? When I talk about marriage, I talk about both heterosexual and same-sex marriage, and I will be clear about when I refer to what. So starting then with heterosexual marriage, this is often seen as the idealized form of romantic relationships. So the proper way to do couple relationships and also the proper context for having and raising children. And for the most of the 20th century, this was the only legally, culturally and socially sanctioned form of romantic intimacy. And this ideal has been produced and reproduced in sociological theory, for example, Parsons and Bales in 1956. But we see changes to this norm of heterosexual marriage. So here is a graph showing you the extent to which people choose to get married. This combines data on both heterosexual and same-sex relationships, showing clearly that people between 1971 and 2022 are not marrying to the same extent. We see a decrease in levels at which the population choose to get married. We've also seen changes in the age at which people marry. So when we compare the age at which people marry, this is in opposite sex marriage, in 1970 and 2010, we see that the age at which people marry tend to increase quite dramatically. So people do their relationships differently. Now, the formalization of same-sex relationships, first with a civil partnership that came through in 2005 and then same-sex marriage in 2013, is perhaps the most dramatic change to intimate life that we have seen in recent decades. Prior to this, there was no legal protection for same-sex relationships. They were not supported in law. That also meant we had no statistical data for knowing what people in those relationships do or did, how they lived their lives in some ways. And now we can begin to track that. But for now, I just want to mention what a radical change this represents. Cohabitation is a third way of measuring change in intimate lives. And cohabitation is also something that's changed dramatically in recent decades. So there has been a rapid rise. In the early 1960s, fewer than 1 in 100 adults under the age of 50 in the UK were cohabiting at any one time. Now in 2011, that was 1 in 6. And in 2022, 9 in 10 couples were cohabiting before choosing to get married. And that compared to in 1994, almost 60% of couples were doing so. So we see a huge rise in cohabitation. And yet, fewer than 1 in 10 agree that there is no point in getting married. So we see very interesting developments here. So is intimate life changing? Yes. On the one hand, statistical data show that people do relationships differently with regards to marriage rates, same-sex relationships, and cohabitation. And no, I would say, because old habits seems to die hard. So despite the increased legal recognition and perhaps legal equality between same and opposite sex relationships, we see that the normative force of heterosexuality, marriage, and the nuclear family remains powerful, and we see that in many of the empirical studies of intimate life that are coming through. Thank you very much for listening.